You have no idea how quietly your mind is being trained. Every test you face is secretly measuring your emotional control, not your strength. Someone already knows which reaction will expose your weakness before you even speak. The first dark lesson is this: the one who stays emotionally steady holds invisible advantage. People think power comes from louder words, sharper arguments, stronger presence. Real power comes from the mind that does not shake when it is silently attacked. When someone pushes your buttons, they are not testing your knowledge, they are testing your nervous system. They watch how fast you react, how strongly you react, and how long you stay disturbed. Every reaction you give creates a psychological profile in their mind. They learn what makes you defensive, what makes you insecure, what makes you eager for approval. They notice when your voice changes, when your eyes shift, when your breathing becomes slightly tighter. You might think you are hiding everything, yet your reactions keep giving a full emotional map. This is how people quietly learn where your control ends and their influence begins. A mentally dangerous person understands that reactions are a kind of currency. Every unnecessary reaction is like paying someone to understand your weaknesses. Every delayed reaction is like saving emotional money for a better moment. When you answer instantly, you act from old training, old wounds, and old triggers. When you answer slowly, you act from awareness, choice, and inner command. So the first silent practice is delay, not silence forever, but delay long enough to see clearly. The mind that pauses gains space between stimulus and answer. Inside that small space, you can examine what is happening instead of being dragged by it. You ask yourself quietly, what is really being tested right now? Is it your intelligence, your dignity, your patience, or your need to prove something? Most people fail these tests because they react to the surface, not the intention. They reply to the words, but ignore the hidden pattern behind the words. Many emotional tests are not about information, they are about control of the atmosphere. Someone might speak in a confusing way, only to see how insecure you become. Someone might ignore you slightly only to see how quickly you chase their attention. A calm mind notices patterns instead of just feeling discomfort. You start to see repeated moves that once controlled you automatically. You notice that certain phrases always make you rush to defend yourself. You see that certain tones always push you into explaining more than necessary. You realize your reactions were trained by past experiences and repeated emotional scripts. This realization is another dark lesson. Your reactions rarely belong to the present moment. They belong to older experiences that still live inside your nervous system. When someone triggers you today, they are waking up yesterday, not simply challenging today. That is why you feel stronger emotion than the situation deserves. You are not just answering them. You are answering every similar moment your mind remembers. To become mentally dangerous in a healthy way, you must interrupt this old script. The interruption begins with observation rather than performance. Instead of rushing to appear strong, smart, or unbothered, you first study the moment. Ask yourself what exactly is happening inside your body right now. Notice your jaw, your shoulders, your stomach, your breath, your heartbeat. A manipulative person wants you to forget your body and stay trapped in the conversation. They want you to chase their words and lose contact with your own inner state. When you return to your body, you step out of their psychological frame. You are no longer just reacting to them, you are also watching yourself from above. This inner watcher is the true source of calm power. The inner watcher speaks in very simple lines. It says you do not need to answer quickly. It says you do not need to prove you understand everything immediately. It says you do not need to protect every part of your image. It reminds you that silence for a short moment is not a weakness. Here is another hidden rule. The fastest reaction is usually the least examined. The least examined reaction is usually the most controlled by others. That is why impulsive replies feel satisfying, but create long regret. You feel powerful for a second, then realize you have exposed too much. Your emotions, your limits, and your mental structure become visible to anyone watching carefully. Calm does not mean you feel nothing. Calm means you carry your feeling without letting it leak everywhere. You can feel anger, but the anger does not decide your next sentence. You can feel hurt, but the hurt does not write your response. This separation between feeling and expression is what makes you mentally dangerous. You become unpredictable in the healthiest way, because your emotions no longer predict your moves. Another dark insight is about emotional bait. Emotional bait is any word, tone, or action designed to pull out a specific reaction. It can be criticism aimed at your ego. It can be praise aimed at your need for validation. It can be doubt aimed at your sense of competence and worth. When you recognize bait, you do not freeze. You simply refuse automatic reaction. You answer with clarity rather than instinct. Sometimes clarity means a short, neutral sentence that gives no extra information. Sometimes clarity means a calm question that redirects the focus to the actual issue. Sometimes clarity means choosing not to engage at all and letting the moment pass. Your goal is not to win every small exchange. Your goal is to protect your inner balance. People who constantly test you are studying your emotional balance like a scientist watches an experiment. They turn up pressure, then watch which part of you cracks first. Do you become sarcastic, defensive, apologetic, dramatic, or completely silent in fear? Each pattern tells them where to press next time for faster control. When you train your mind to stay calm under growing pressure, something interesting happens. The person testing you begins to feel uncertain instead. They cannot read you as easily. Their usual levers no longer move you. Their confidence in their control decreases, and they start questioning their own strategy. The energy of testing quietly shifts back toward them. This shift does not require you to dominate them. It only requires inner stability. Inner stability comes from a few practical micro-habits. You breathe a little slower when tension appears. You lower your internal speed instead of racing ahead. You notice your thoughts like passing clouds instead of believing everyone is truth. You remind yourself that discomfort is not danger. Most emotional tests are uncomfortable, not actually dangerous. When your mind treats discomfort like danger, it fires alarms everywhere. Those alarms push you toward rapid reaction instead of measured response. The more you practice staying present inside discomfort, the less power the test holds. Another silent strategy is to separate content from intention. Content is what is being said. Intention is why it is being said now. A calm mind listens to content, but studies intention more deeply. You ask inside whether this interaction is genuine, curious, or simply probing. You notice if the timing feels natural or designed to destabilize you. When intention becomes clear, your emotional response changes completely. You stop taking every word personally because you see the structure behind it. Once the structure is visible, it loses part of its mystery and grip. You start predicting the next move instead of being shocked by it. This prediction gives you a strange, quiet confidence others cannot understand. At this stage, your calmness is no longer simple self-control. It becomes a form of psychological vision. You see how many people are driven by unconscious insecurity. You see how many tests are really cries for control or hidden fear. You recognize that not every attack deserves a counterattack from a disciplined mind. Yet there is a deeper layer that changes everything further. What happens when you realize your own mind has been testing others the same way? What happens when you notice how often you search for reactions to feel secure? What happens when you see that your need to read others is also a form of control? When you finally study this mirror honestly, whose training will you decide to break first? Do you know why some people sense your inner uncertainty instantly? Do you realize how quickly your emotions can be pulled without any force? Do you understand that the mind reveals more through silence than words? The second dark lesson begins with a hidden rule. Perception creates power long before action. People who understand perception know how to read you before you even speak. They observe subtle cues you ignore because you think emotions stay inside your body. Your micro-reactions are not silent to trained minds, they become signals. A single tightening of your jaw can show resistance. A small shift in your breath can show discomfort. Your eyes reveal confusion faster than any sentence you try to form. These tiny signals create a map of your emotional patterns. This map tells others which areas of your mind are unprotected. When someone tests you, they do not test your entire personality. They test the exact areas where those signals indicate vulnerability. That is why certain situations always feel harder for you than others. You might think you hide your doubts, but doubts leak through body language. You think you hide your fear of rejection, but hesitation reveals it. You think you hide your need for validation, but your quick explanations make it visible. You think you hide your insecurity, but your tone reveals tightening that words try to cover. This is where perception becomes silent influence. People who read you fast can position themselves as mentally superior. Their calmness appears natural, but it is often strategic. They watch your emotional state shift so they can adjust their moves. They know when to speak slower, when to pause, when to let silence stretch. Silence is one of the strongest psychological tools. Silence forces your mind to fill the gap with your own assumptions. If you are insecure, silence becomes pressure. If you are defensive, silence becomes a mirror. If you are ungrounded, silence becomes a threat. A mentally dangerous person uses silence differently. They do not use it for intimidation or manipulation. They use it to observe their own inner state before responding. This slow inner checking removes emotional noise from the moment. When you remove noise, intention becomes clearer. Intention reading is a powerful inner practice. Most people listen to what is said, but miss why it is said now. Why is the tone slightly changed today? Why is the question directed toward your personal limits? Why does the timing feel off compared to previous moments? Once you train your mind to focus on intention instead of emotion, power shifts quietly. You stop feeling overwhelmed by words and start analyzing the pattern. Patterns reveal consistency behind uncertainty. Manipulative behavior rarely appears random. It follows a hidden sequence. There is always a small build-up before the real test is delivered. You start noticing this build-up with surprising clarity. The slight change in attention, the subtle criticism, the weak smile, the delayed response. All these signals prepare the emotional ground for a quiet test. Once you notice them, the test loses power because you saw it before it happened. Preparation destroys manipulation long before it reaches your emotions. Your mind becomes a watcher instead of a reactor. The watcher notices the psychological frame someone is trying to place around you. The frame determines how you interpret their words. If you fall into their frame, you react from their chosen angle. If you stay outside their frame, you respond from your own grounded position. This difference is everything. The one inside the frame feels pressured. The one outside the frame feels calm. You decide which position is yours through awareness, not strength. Awareness creates emotional distance without emotional coldness. Another part of this lesson is understanding emotional anchoring. Emotional anchoring happens when someone links a feeling to a moment. Once the link is created, they can recreate the feeling with subtle cues. A single tone can bring back your nervousness. A single phrase can make you rush to defend yourself. A single expression can activate your need for approval. These anchors were created through repetition long before you noticed. You reacted the same way many times, so the mind stored the pattern. This storage becomes a shortcut for others to influence you. A mentally dangerous person breaks every emotional anchor slowly. They practice giving different reactions to the same triggers. This practice rewires your emotional training. You train your mind to respond neutrally to old threats. You reply calmly to comments that once made you defensive. You stay steady in moments that once made you insecure. You learn that emotional freedom is not removing feelings, but removing predictable reactions. Once your reactions stop being predictable, perception changes completely. Others cannot place you into easy categories anymore. They cannot read your emotional script from past behavior. Their psychological tools stop working the same way. Your unpredictability becomes a shield, not a weapon. With this shift comes another insight. The mind that cannot be read becomes the mind that cannot be controlled. You gain this unreadability not through deception, but through regulation. Regulation comes from observation, grounding, and conscious delay. When your inner pace is slower than the external pressure, you stay in command. Pressure loses influence when your mind refuses automatic speed. But you must question something deeper now. If perception can be shaped and controlled so easily, then what shapes your own perception? What hidden filters inside your mind decide what you notice and what you ignore? If those filters remain unexamined, then who is truly seeing the moment clearly? What if your own perception is already trained by forces you never questioned? Do you know why your mind accepts certain lies without a fight? Do you realize how quickly you trust familiar patterns even when they harm you? Do you understand that most of your beliefs were planted before you ever examined them? The third dark lesson begins with internal conditioning, the invisible teacher behind your emotional reactions. Internal conditioning is the silent set of rules you follow without conscious agreement. You obey these rules because your mind believes they keep you safe. You might think safety comes from strength, but emotional safety often comes from old fear. Your mind protects you based on memories, not based on reality. These memories form emotional filters. Every situation you face passes through these filters before reaching your awareness. If your filter expects rejection, you will sense rejection even when it is not there. If your filter expects disrespect, you will notice disrespect faster than anything else. If your filter expects conflict, you will predict conflict even in neutral moments. This is why emotional intelligence requires understanding the architecture of your own perception. Perception is not a window, it is a lens. The lens decides what enters your awareness and what stays outside. Manipulative people understand this better than most. They do not change the facts, they change the lens through which you see the facts. When someone alters your lens, they alter your emotional truth. You start reacting to their version of the moment instead of the real moment. Your certainty becomes misplaced because it is built on filtered input. The mind believes what it sees, even when the vision is shaped by someone else. This quiet shaping is one of the most powerful psychological tools. To protect your mind, you must know how these filters are formed. Filters grow from repeated emotional experiences. Each experience leaves a small trace inside your nervous system. These traces combine into patterns, and patterns combine into expectations. Expectations shape perception long before logic gets a chance to speak. This means your emotional reactions are often predictions, not responses. You react based on what you expect, not what is happening. You defend against threats that are not present. You submit to pressure that nobody is applying. You fear outcomes that exist only inside your memories. This is the hidden trap manipulators exploit. They do not need to attack you directly, they only need to activate your filters. Once the filter becomes active, you react on your own. They simply observe the predictable outcome. Your mind does their work for them. To escape this trap, you need to identify your emotional triggers. A trigger is not the event. The trigger is the meaning your mind attaches to the event. A comment is not the trigger. The fear behind the comment is the trigger. A question is not the trigger. The insecurity it touches is the trigger. A silence is not the trigger. The old expectation behind silence is the trigger. Recognizing triggers requires slowing down the inner process. You ask yourself what exact feeling just moved inside you. Is it fear, shame, pressure, doubt, or the urgency to prove something? You look at the feeling without acting on it immediately. This inner pause exposes the filter behind the emotion. Once the filter is exposed, it loses part of its power. A filter that is seen cannot operate in darkness anymore. Your awareness weakens automatic reaction and strengthens conscious response. The moment you choose response over reaction, you break the old conditioning. This break is the foundation of mental danger because it destroys predictability. But there is a deeper element. Internal expectations do not only distort perception, they attract similar patterns repeatedly. The mind searches for what matches its expectations. It confirms what it already believes. It ignores signals that contradict old fears. It pays more attention to threats than opportunities because old patterns want to stay alive. When you change your internal expectations, the world you perceive changes subtly. You do not become naive or careless. You become objective, something very rare in emotional environments. Objectivity creates calm because it separates fact from interpretation. Calmness creates strength because it frees you from unnecessary internal noise. Another layer of conditioning happens through emotional repetition. If you repeatedly experience disrespect, your mind expects disrespect everywhere. If you repeatedly experience instability, your mind expects instability in every situation. If you repeatedly experience pressure, your mind expects pressure even in silence. This repeated pattern becomes the default lens of your awareness. Your goal is not to erase old patterns, but to weaken their authority. You learn to question every automatic interpretation. You ask yourself whether the moment is truly dangerous or just familiar. You ask whether the discomfort is real or just old memory talking. You ask whether the reaction belongs to today or to yesterday. This self-questioning builds inner clarity. Inner clarity prevents emotional illusions from controlling you. Emotional illusions are the most dangerous traps because they feel true. They create emotional certainty without factual accuracy. Certainty without accuracy is what makes people easy to influence. A mentally dangerous person breaks this connection. They no longer believe every emotional signal automatically. They test their feelings against reality instead of reacting instantly. This mental discipline creates psychological independence. Once independent, your emotional state stops belonging to other people's intentions. But now another question rises. If your inner world has been shaped by past patterns and hidden filters, what else inside you is trained without your permission? What part of your emotional identity was never truly yours? And if those silent forces built your reactions, what happens when you finally dismantle the system behind them? Do you know why your strength disappears the moment someone challenges your certainty? Do you realize how quickly your confidence collapses when an old fear gets activated? Do you understand that your inner power is controlled by systems you never built consciously? The fourth dark lesson reveals the deepest layer, the architecture of inner authority. Inner authority is the voice inside you that decides what you believe about yourself. This voice is not natural. It is constructed over years through approval, rejection, fear, and repeated emotional training. You follow this voice automatically because it feels like your own judgment. Yet most of the time, it echoes the expectations of others instead of your true understanding. This voice quietly dictates your limits. It tells you when to stay silent and when to speak. It tells you which situations feel possible and which feel threatening. It tells you when you deserve respect and when you should withdraw. This voice becomes the internal source of control that others rely on without needing force. The real danger is that this voice often speaks from old emotional wounds. It repeats outdated lessons that no longer match your present abilities. You might be capable of staying strong, but the old voice insists you are not. You might be ready for respect, but the old voice tells you to shrink. You might deserve calmness, but the old voice pushes you toward fear. Manipulators thrive on this old voice because they do not need to overpower you. They only need to activate the voice you already obey. A small comment can awaken your self-doubt. A small pause can trigger your fear of disapproval. A small shift in tone can make you surrender control without resistance. The real battle is not between you and them. The real battle is between your present self and your conditioned inner authority. If you do not challenge this voice, you remain an easy target for emotional manipulation. If you challenge the voice, everything begins to change. Challenging the voice starts with one question: who taught me to think this way? Did someone's criticism shape the way you judge yourself today? Did someone's silence teach you to fear being ignored? Did someone's unpredictability train you to constantly anticipate danger? These lessons remain active long after the original source disappears. Your mind keeps repeating the pattern, because it assumes repetition equals safety. But repetition only creates predictability, not strength. Your emotional system prefers familiar discomfort over unfamiliar stability. That is why you stay trapped in mental circles you dislike, but do not break. The system protects its structure even when the structure harms you. Another invisible influence is internal obedience. Your mind obeys emotional rules without checking if the rules still make sense. If a rule was formed through fear, you continue obeying it even when the fear is gone. If a rule was formed through pressure, you still feel pressure even in peaceful moments. The system does not update itself unless you interrupt its rhythm. Interruption is the technique that begins emotional liberation. Interruption means noticing an automatic reaction and choosing a different response. You feel the old fear, but you do not follow it. You feel the old doubt, but you do not let it decide your action. You feel the old insecurity, but you do not repeat the old pattern. This break creates a micro-fracture in the system. Each fracture weakens the old authority and strengthens your new one. With enough fractures, the system stops controlling you. You begin to write your own rules instead of obeying inherited ones. Your mind becomes grounded instead of conditioned. Grounded mind is the strongest psychological shield. It sees situations as they are, not as old training interprets them. It feels emotions fully, but does not let them dictate behavior. It recognizes pressure, but does not collapse under it. It accepts discomfort without confusing it with danger. Once grounded, you start noticing something important. Not every challenge is hostile, some are neutral. Not every silence is rejection, some are natural pauses. Not every question is judgment, some are curiosity. Not every disagreement is disrespect, some are simply different views. Your perception becomes balanced instead of reactive. This balance makes you mentally dangerous in the most ethical way. People cannot shake you easily. People cannot confuse your emotions. People cannot pull fears you have already disarmed. This quiet stability intimidates insecure minds, not because you are aggressive, but because you do not collapse the way they expect. Their usual strategies stop working. Their emotional bait goes unanswered. Their attempts to destabilize you become ineffective. They feel exposed because your calmness reflects their chaos. Your inner authority grows stronger through 3 silent practices. The first practice is emotional neutrality. You learn to experience feelings without translating them into immediate beliefs. You can feel nervous without believing you are weak. You can feel confused without believing you are wrong. You can feel challenged without believing you are attacked. The second practice is internal questioning. You ask yourself whether the moment truly deserves the reaction your body is preparing. Is this anger real or conditioned? Is this fear real or familiar? Is this urgency real or trained? This questioning breaks emotional illusions instantly. The third practice is cognitive distancing. You learn to watch your thoughts instead of merging with them. A thought appears, but you do not treat it as absolute truth. You observe the thought like a passing cloud. This distance prevents thoughts from pulling your emotions into automatic storms. With these practices, your mind becomes a stable structure. Stability changes everything, because you no longer move according to someone else's intention. You move according to clarity, awareness, and inner strength. This shift makes your emotional identity untouchable. But there is a final revelation. The system inside you mirrors the systems around you. Every society, group, and circle follows emotional patterns. Every environment teaches its own form of control. The same psychological principles that shape individuals shape entire dynamics. When you see the pattern inside yourself, you also see the pattern around you. You begin to understand how people operate emotionally without needing to decode them one by one. You see which behaviors arise from insecurity. You see which behaviors come from fear of losing control. You see which behaviors reflect hidden need for validation. You see which behaviors are projections of old wounds. Your awareness becomes panoramic. You no longer focus on words, you focus on structures. You no longer chase meaning, you observe intention. You no longer react to pressure, you analyze the system creating pressure. This is the mind of true power, calm, sharp, and untouchable. And now the final twist emerges. You have dismantled conditioning, studied perception, broken emotional filters, and rebuilt inner authority. You stand at the place where clarity replaces confusion. But a deeper question rises quietly from within. If you can see through others this clearly now, what happens when someone else tries to read a mind that is no longer shaped by old patterns, no longer predictable, no longer controlled? What will they do when they meet a version of you that cannot be triggered by fear, baited by insecurity, or manipulated by silence? What kind of psychological power will emerge when your mind finally belongs fully to you?